The crowded airport buzzed with impatient travelers, rolling suitcases and echoing announcements. Amid the chaos, a young black woman stood frozen at the counter, her heart pounding as the gate agent smirked and waved her torn boarding pass in the air. People stared. Whispers spread. She lost her papers, someone sneered. But what no one knew was that this woman wasn't just any passenger. She was carrying something far more powerful than a ticket. In the next few minutes, her calm defiance would turn humiliation into history, and the entire airline would regret ever underestimating her. It had started as an ordinary morning for Amara Johnson, a young woman on her way to Geneva for an international conference. At just 27, she had already made waves in global education, advocating for equality and access for underprivileged children. Her hard work had earned her an invitation to represent her organization abroad, a dream she'd nurtured since college. She arrived early at the airport, neatly dressed, documents organized, and confidence in her stride. But as she approached the check-in counter, the mood changed. The agent behind the desk barely looked up, her polite smile fading when she noticed Amara's skin color. Her tone turned cold, detached, a stark contrast to how she greeted the passengers before her. Amara tried to stay calm, handing over her passport and visa. The agent flipped through the pages, tapping her manicured nails on the counter as though waiting for a mistake to appear. Then, suddenly, she raised her voice. "You don't have the proper documents," she announced loudly enough for others to hear. Confused, Amara leaned closer, explaining that everything was in order. But before she could finish, the agent shoved her papers aside and called for security. Travelers nearby glanced over, some curious, others judgmental. The humiliation burned in Amara's chest as she watched her opportunity slipping away. All because someone had decided she didn't belong. Still, she stood tall, refusing to let anger control her. Amara knew something the others didn't. Behind her calm eyes was proof of who she truly was, and soon the world would see it too. Security arrived within minutes, two uniformed officers who looked more irritated than concerned. The gate agent wasted no time twisting the story, claiming Amara had shown suspicious documents and refused to cooperate. Passengers began pulling out their phones, eager for a spectacle. Amara's throat tightened as she realized how quickly truth could be buried beneath assumptions. She calmly explained that her passport and visa were valid, even pointing to the official stamps. But the agent folded her arms and smirked, saying, "Then why does this look fake?" Her words dripped with arrogance, and before Amara could respond, the woman crumpled the boarding pass and tossed it in the trash. Gas rippled through the line. Some people looked away, others whispered. A man in a business suit muttered, "They should just let her go." But no one stepped forward. Amara could feel the weight of every silent judgment pressing down on her. She'd seen that look before, the one that said, "You don't belong here." One of the officers asked to see her identification again, flipping through it as though hunting for a reason to doubt her. Amara's pulse raced, but her voice stayed steady. She knew she couldn't afford to lose her composure. Not now, not when prejudice wanted her to break. "Ma'am," she said firmly, "you're making a mistake." But the agent scoffed. "People like you always say that." The words hit harder than any shove could. Still, Amara refused to let the moment define her. She took a slow breath, reached into her folder, and pulled out an embossed envelope, one sealed with the emblem of the United Nations. When she opened it, the light caught the golden insignia, gleaming like quiet thunder. Inside was her official invitation, signed by the Secretary General himself, naming her as a keynote speaker at the Global Education Summit. For a split second, silence fell. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. The agent's smirk faltered, replaced by the pale realization of what she'd just done. But Amara wasn't done yet. She calmly took out her phone, turned on the camera, and began recording, not in anger, but in truth. Her voice was steady as she explained how she'd been humiliated for her skin color, how a woman entrusted with helping travelers had instead tried to destroy her dignity. "Maybe now," she said softly, "people will see what's really happening." Around her, the crowd's energy shifted. Some lowered their phones, ashamed. Others murmured apologies. But Amara didn't need their pity. She wanted accountability. As she walked toward the security office with her head held high, a reporter from a nearby terminal, who had been watching the scene unfold, began following her. What started as in the story exploded within hours. By the time Amara landed in Geneva, her video had already gone viral. Millions had watched the humiliating footage, the gate agent's mocking tone, the moment the boarding pass was torn, and Amara's calm response as she revealed the UN seal. News outlets picked it up across continents, calling it a wake-up call for corporate racism. Meanwhile, back at the airport, chaos erupted. The airline's PR team scrambled to contain the backlash, releasing hurried statements about reviewing the incident. But it was too late. Screens around the world replayed the image of Amara, poised, dignified, and unbroken, standing before those who had tried to strip her of respect. The next morning, Amara took the stage at the Global Education Summit. The vast conference hall shimmered under bright lights, packed with diplomats, journalists, and leaders. As she stepped to the podium, a hush fell over the room. Cameras flashed, capturing the woman who had turned humiliation into a movement. She didn't begin with statistics or policy. She began with her story. "I was told my documents didn't look real," she said, her voice steady but full of fire. "But racism doesn't always need proof. Sometimes it just needs a face to target." The audience listened in silence, some nodding, others visibly moved. She spoke about the invisible walls people build, in airports, in offices, in hearts, and how education could break them down. When she finished, the room erupted in applause that seemed to shake the very air. People stood, clapping not just for her courage, but for the truth she had forced the world to confront. At that moment, Amara wasn't just a victim. She was a symbol of strength, resilience, and grace. The same woman who had been mocked for losing papers now held a crowd of global leaders in rapt attention, and far away, the gate agent watched the broadcast on her breakroom TV, her face pale as she realized she had become the face of a scandal that would haunt her career forever. Days after the summit, Amara's speech became a global turning point. News anchors, activists, and educators across the world quoted her words. "Racism doesn't always need proof. Sometimes it just needs a face to target." Hashtags demanding justice flooded social media. The airline was forced to issue a public apology, suspend the gate agent, and announce new diversity and bias training programs for all employees. But Amara didn't seek revenge. She sought change. When asked by reporters what justice meant to her, she simply said, "Accountability is the beginning, not the end. I want to make sure no young girl ever has to prove her worth to be treated with respect." Her calm strength inspired millions. Universities invited her to speak, organizations offered collaborations, and her story became part of a larger conversation about everyday racism in spaces people assume are neutral. Back home, Amara sat quietly by her window, watching a plane soar across the sunset. The same scene that once represented pain now symbolized power. She had taken an act meant to break her and transformed it into a message that would travel farther than any flight could. Somewhere across the city, the gate agent, now suspended and under investigation, replayed the footage that had changed her life. For the first time, she truly saw herself through another lens. The cruelty in her tone, the smugness in her expression, the disbelief that she could have been so blind. Amara's story wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about awakening. For everyone who had ever been dismissed, judged, or silenced because of the color of their skin. In the end, her voice didn't just echo through airports or conference halls. It echoed through hearts. And as her final interview went viral, she left the world with a question that lingered longer than any headline. When you see injustice in front of you, will you stay silent or will you stand up?